November 2nd, 1943. Altitude 25,000 feet. Location over Bremen, Germany. The sky was a cage of ice and contrails. Sunlight burned through thin cirrus, glinting off aluminum wings that stretched like twin spears through the frozen air. Below, the Reich's industrial heart pumped black smoke into the heavens. Factories, refineries, the lifeblood of a war that refused to die. Inside, one of the twin boom fighters, Lieutenant Jack Ifrey of the 20th Fighter Group, gripped the control column. His breath fogged the inside of his oxygen mask. The P-38 Lightning hummed beneath him, both Allison V-1710 engines synchronized in a metallic duet that vibrated through his bones. On his radio, a warning snapped through the static. Bandits, 12 o'clock high! Looks like 109s, coming in fast! The Germans came out of the sun, diving in from altitude with practiced contempt. They called the P-38 Der Gabelschwanz, Teufel, the fork-tailed devil, but many still sneered when they saw it. To them, it was a clumsy giant, too big, too heavy, too strange to survive a dogfight. At that moment, as yellow-nosed Messerschmitts streaked toward the formation, Ilfrey's heart slammed against his ribs. The cold, the fear, the anticipation, they merged into a single pulse. He rolled the Lightning hard to the right, throttles wide open. The twin tails sliced the air like blades through silk. Tracer fire stitched the sky. The first burst missed by inches. The second tore through the tail of the lead P-38 ahead of him. A flash, a scream, a spiral of smoke. This is green too. I'm hit, I'm hit. The radio went silent. Ilfrey's gloved hand tightened. He pushed both throttles forward, 3,000 RPM. The twin Allisons roared. The Lightning surged ahead with a vengeance that few German pilots expected. It didn't turn like a Spitfire. It didn't climb like a Mustang, but when it dived, God help whoever was in front of it. He saw one Messerschmitt crossing below. He rolled inverted and dove. Speed climbed, 350, 400, 420 miles per hour. The horizon blurred. His canopy shook. Gun camera film later showed the moment. 450 caliber guns and 120 mm cannon spat fire. The Bf-109 disintegrated mid-roll, its left wing torn free. Ilfrey leveled out, panting. Below him, the wreck spiraled into the clouds. For a second, the sky went still. Only the whisper of the engines and the faint smell of burnt oil. But it wasn't over. Two more German fighters turned in to engage. He could feel their confidence. Years of dominance, thousands of kills, the arrogance of the Luftwaffe still unbroken. He keyed his radio again. Form up, two-ship element. We fight in pairs, like the book says. That phrase, we fight in pairs, became the heartbeat of the Lightning's doctrine. Alone, it was vulnerable. Together, it became a trap that even the most seasoned Luftwaffe aces learned to fear. As the pair rolled back toward their attackers, the P-38s moved like dancers, covering each other's blind spots. Twin trails of condensation crossed the high blue like swords meeting in the cold. Below, the German pilots realized too late. The prey had changed. Within 60 seconds, the hunters became the hunted. The last radio call from the German flight leader crackled through Allied intercepts that day. Achtung! Zwei Schwanzger! Say Kommandos Baden Seiten. Attention! Twin-tailed fighters! They're coming from both sides. The transmission ended in static. And in that frozen air over Bremen, the myth of German air superiority began to fracture. The P-38s climbed into the sun once more, contrails twisting into the light like ghosts of their fallen foes. For years, they had laughed at the Lightning. Now, they whispered its name like a curse. In the early years of the war, the skies over Europe belonged to the Luftwaffe. From the Channel to the Volga, German fighters carved their dominance with ruthless precision. Names like Galland Marseille and Hartmann were whispered like legends. They flew Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, sleek, deadly, and battle-hardened. Against this empire of the air came an American machine so unconventional that many thought it a mistake. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Twin engines, twin tails, and a cockpit perched between like the sting of an insect. It was unlike anything the Germans had ever faced. And at first, they mocked it. When the first Lightnings appeared in the skies of North Africa and over the Mediterranean in 1942, Luftwaffe pilots radioed each other in disbelief. Zwei Flugzeuge zusammengeklebt. Two airplanes glued together. The jokes came easy. Its long wings made it look awkward. Its twin booms seemed fragile, and in the dense, humid air of Europe, its early Allison engines suffered. Compressors overheated. Pilots complained of cockpit heat, so intense their compasses warped. In some squadrons, men begged to fly anything else. But the Americans saw something else, a promise hidden in the design. At a time when the RAF's Spitfire and the Luftwaffe's 109 could barely escort bombers past 200 miles, the Lightning could fly more than 300 miles round trip. It could climb higher than 40,000 feet, and with 2 engines it could bring its pilot home even after one was dead. By 1943, the United States Army Air Forces faced a deadly truth. Their daylight bombing campaign over Germany was bleeding men. B-17s and B-24s were flying into the heart of the Reich without long-range escort. The Luftwaffe tore them apart. Entire groups vanished into smoke and falling aluminum, and the men who survived came back shaken, haunted by the endless black puffs of flak and the flashing yellow noses of enemy fighters. The order went out from General Eaker himself. Find us a fighter that can reach Berlin and back. The Lockheed engineers believed the answer already existed. If only the Lightning could be refined, tamed, and trusted. Thus began a transformation not just in design, but in doctrine. The P-38 would not be flown as a lone duelist. It would hunt as a pair, each pilot watching the other's tail, weaving, turning, covering. A deadly ballet that exploited the Lightning's greatest strength, speed, climb, and firepower concentrated in its nose. Meanwhile, in German ready rooms, the arrogance continued. Pilots pinned photos of the strange twin boom aircraft on bulletin boards with crude jokes scribbled underneath. They called it Esel, the donkey, but laughter fades fast when the sky turns red. By the fall of 1943, the 55th and 20th Fighter Groups began operations from England. Silver wings gleamed on frosted runways. Pilots stood beside their aircraft, faces pale with cold and fear, trying to believe that this new machine could protect the bomber streams stretching toward the Ruhr and beyond. They would soon find out. The Luftwaffe, too, was changing. Fuel shortages, replacement pilot inexperience, and the unrelenting strain of 2 fronts began to erode its power. But in the air, the veterans still held the advantage. They had fought since Spain. They believed the Lightning was just another American mistake. In every sense, it was a clash of philosophies, German tradition and instinct, against American engineering and adaptation, old world mastery versus industrial innovation. And as winter closed over Europe, the stage was set for a confrontation that would turn ridicule into respect. 1,000 miles of sky separated disbelief from destiny. The P-38 Lightning was not born from elegance. It was forged from calculation, every inch of metal dictated by speed, altitude, and necessity. Lockheed's chief engineer, Clarence Kelly Johnson, called it a fighter built around its engines. And those engines, the Allison V1710F series, were twin hearts that beat in perfect mechanical harmony. Each engine drove a counter, rotating propeller, eliminating torque and giving the aircraft stability in vertical climbs. Between them, a slender central nacelle held the cockpit, guns, and nose landing gear. It was unconventional, asymmetrical, beautiful in its defiance of tradition. Where the Spitfire curved gracefully and the Messerschmitt sliced like a dagger, the Lightning looked alien. But at full power, 475 horsepower per engine, it could climb faster than most single-engine fighters could dive. Its service ceiling exceeded 44,000 feet, higher than any operational Allied fighter when it entered combat. At 410 miles per hour, the Lightning could outrun nearly everything in the sky, and its firepower, 450 caliber Browning machine guns and a single 20 WW Hispano cannon, all mounted in the nose. No convergence zones, no spread, just a single devastating line of fire that could tear through bombers or fighters alike. Gun camera footage from 1943 shows a German Ju-88 evaporating under 1 2-second burst. The Lightning didn't just shoot, it amputated. Yet the machine's power demanded discipline. Its twin engines meant double the management: mixture, prop pitch, intercoolers, radiators. Its control surfaces stiffened above 400 MIV in a dive. Pilots could feel the stick lock solid, their gloved hands straining against an invisible wall. Many early crashes weren't from enemy fire, but from pilots who underestimated the beast they flew. Lockheed's engineers called it compressibility, a word few had even heard before. At high speeds near Mach 68, the airflow over the wing changed, pinning the aircraft into its dive. The first men to experience it described the sensation like falling into stone. It was only when test pilot Tony Levere dove deliberately into the phenomenon, risking his life in the California desert, that they discovered recovery techniques: level the trim, reduce power, wait until denser air restores control. The Lightning was learning to breathe thin air, and so were the men who flew it. Strategically, the P-38's doctrine evolved around mutual protection. Two aircraft, never one. They called it the Finger Four formation, where pairs overlapped like the spread of a hand. Each man watched his partner's blind spots, weaving constantly. It was not about turning duels. It was about positioning, energy, and altitude. The P-38 wins before the fight begins. One instructor at Newthampstead said, "The Germans, used to lone hunters and tight, turn-knife fights, did not understand this new rhythm. They mistook the P-38 spacing for weakness. But when they dove in, the twin Lightnings folded around each other, crossing lines of fire, trading roles, striking with synchronized violence. A pair could shred a formation, disengage, and vanish before a response formed. The Lightning's character was contradictory, cold, mechanical, and ruthless in combat, yet oddly merciful to its pilots. Lose one engine, and it could still fly home. Lose half your power, and it would limp across the channel. More than one man owed his life to that second propeller spinning in the gray Atlantic wind. By late 1943, crews began to trust it. They stopped mocking the awkward shape and started naming their aircraft California Cutie, Fork-tailed Devil, Miss Virginia, each name painted in bold cursive on silver skin, a small act of faith in a machine that no longer seemed alien. When General Jimmy Doolittle inspected the P-38 line, he simply nodded and said, "It's not pretty. But war doesn't ask for pretty." The Lightning was no longer an experiment. It was an idea given wings, a doctrine of power, endurance, and partnership, a machine that mirrored the nation that built it, bold, industrial, and unwilling to back down. And somewhere above the clouds, the engineer's dream waited to be proven in the crucible of combat. Soon, arrogance would meet altitude, and the Luftwaffe would learn that mockery is no armor against innovation. December 13, 1943. The weather over Bremen was cruel and pale. Ice crystals drifted through the contrails of hundreds of bombers climbing toward the heart of Germany. At 25,000 feet, the 55th Fighter Group's P-38 Lightnings formed up to escort the B-17s on one of the longest daylight missions yet attempted. They had trained for this moment. Two ship elements, weaving, watching, ready. Below them, the black bursts of flak blossomed like poisonous flowers. Ahead, thin specks of silver appeared on the horizon, Messerschmitts. The Germans were confident. They had faced Spitfires, Thunderbolts, and Mustangs before. But this ungainly twin-tailed creature, they laughed when they saw it. Ian Whiter's Amerikanisches Spielzeug, one pilot joked. Another American toy. Their flight leader, Hauptmann Edward Tratt, led the 109s into a shallow dive. They intended to cut through the escort, break the bomber box apart, and vanish before the gunners could react. It was a familiar dance. They had done it 100 times before, but the rhythm changed. From above and behind, two P-38s rolled into the sun, their counter-rotating propellers flashing like saw blades. The lead Lightning's radio cracked to life. "Red flight, Tolly, ho, break now." The sky erupted. Gun camera film shows the moment. A 20 cannon burst from the P-38's nose, shattering the canopy of the lead Messerschmitt. 1 second he was there, the next a cloud of debris scattered across the blue. The German formation split, each pilot banking hard, searching for the threat they thought too clumsy to be dangerous. The Lightning stayed together. Every move one made, the other mirrored. They rolled, dived, and climbed in perfect symmetry, hunting not as predators of instinct, but of discipline. Lieutenant Virgil Smith of the 20th Fighter Group recalled, "They always dove out of the sun on us. But that day, we were already there, waiting. The first one never even knew we'd seen him." The Luftwaffe pilots tried to counter with tight spirals, standard Bf-109E tactics, but at altitude, where oxygen thinned and engines gasped, The Lightning's turbo superchargers gave it strength the Germans couldn't match. While the Messerschmitts struggled to climb, the P-38s simply rose above them and rolled over, diving again with crushing force. I watched my tracers walk into his tail. Smith's combat report reads, "He blew up, and for a second all I saw was a flash of white light. Then nothing. Within 6 minutes, the engagement was over. 4 Bf-109s destroyed, 2 damaged, no P-38s lost." The bomber crews below watched in awe as silver contrails twisted through the German sky. For the first time, they saw their escorts win. It was a simple thing, 2 fighters against 4. But in that moment, something fundamental changed in the war above Europe. Reports from German ground controllers that day carried a note of disbelief. Enemy twin engine fighters exhibiting superior climb. Fast, coordinated, dangerous. They had underestimated it for too long. The Americans had taken a strange, flawed machine and turned it into a predator that could strike at any height, any range, and come home again. As dusk fell over the English coast, the Lightnings returned, paint-scorched, guns empty. Ground crews met them in the freezing wind, counting bullet holes and victory claims. But the pilots were quiet. They had seen the change in the enemy's eyes. It wasn't arrogance anymore. It was caution. Somewhere in a Luftwaffe debriefing room that night, a young German pilot muttered under his breath, "Zwei Schwans, Teufel der Name passed. Two-tailed devil the name fits." And from that day forward, when radar screens lit up with twin signatures, they no longer laughed, they scrambled. The mockery had ended. Reality had arrived on silver wings. Winter, 1944. Across occupied Europe, the Luftwaffe's laughter had turned to silence. What had once been a curiosity, an ungainly twin-engine experiment, had become a hunter that stalked them at altitude and shadowed their bombers across the continent. The P-38 Lightning had grown teeth, and the Germans knew it. They called it der Gabelschwanz, Teufel, the fork-tailed devil, with a new tone, half respect, half dread. Even veterans like Oberleutnant Franz Stigler, who had flown over 300 missions, wrote in his diary, "They come in pairs, always in pairs. You can hit one, but the other kills you before you can breathe." The Lightning's evolution was relentless. Lockheed's engineers worked as furiously as its pilots fought. The new P-38J variant corrected the high-altitude weaknesses that had once limited it. Its turbo superchargers were redesigned with better intercoolers. A chin radiator beneath the propeller nacelles cooled the engines more efficiently, and a paddle blade propeller delivered smoother thrust. Now it could dive past 500 mph without locking up, speed once unthinkable for a twin-engine aircraft. The change was immediate. In January 1944, during missions over Frankfurt and Hanover, German pilots reported that P-38s were attacking from vertical dives at speeds previously impossible. One Luftwaffe flight instructor warned, "If you see 2 of them above you, you are already dead." The Americans refined their tactics as rapidly as Lockheed refined the airframe. 2. Ship elements became the foundation of the U.S. fighter escort doctrine. No Lightning flew alone. They wove and turned like mirror images, one attacking, the other covering. Gun camera footage from the 20th Fighter Group shows 2 P-38s circling opposite directions around a group of WW190s, slicing through them in a deadly figure 8. Each engagement left German formations shredded. Each loss strained their already crumbling morale. By spring, bomber crews who once prayed to see Mustangs now looked skyward for twin tails. A B-17 navigator wrote in his logbook after the Regensburg raid, "Those 2 silver devils came out of the sun like angels. The 190s broke and ran." Still, war is never a one-sided game. The Luftwaffe adapted. They developed new tactics. Head-on attacks, tight scissors turns, diving beneath the bombers to strike from below. Some even experimented with the new Bf-9 G6U-4, armed with heavy 30mm cannons, hoping a single hit could down the Lightning. But at altitude, the P-38's turbochargers made it nearly untouchable. Its range let it strike airfields deep inside France and the Low Countries, turning every takeoff into a gamble. The fear spread to the ground. German soldiers began calling air raids accompanied by Lightnings, Doppelblitz, double lightning. The twin booms descending from the clouds meant destruction that came in mirrored pairs. By mid-1944, The Luftwaffe's high command realized the scale of the threat. They issued a memo warning pilots to avoid climbing duels with the P-38 and to engage only when it was distracted. But distractions were rare in the cold precision of lightning formations. The shift in tone was profound. Once, the Luftwaffe had mocked. Now, they prepared their new pilots with fear. Training manuals included silhouettes of the Lightning underlined in red, captioned, "Treat this aircraft with extreme caution. Do not attempt pursuit if it dives." On both sides of the channel, the Lightning had become a symbol of adaptation. The weapon that proved innovation could outrun arrogance. It was still not perfect. Its cockpit was stifling, its roll sluggish compared to single-engine fighters. But in its partnership, in the two-ship element, it had found invincibility, and in that discovery, fear changed hands. The hunters now flew with American stars on their wings. In the words of Captain Robin Olds, who would one day become one of America's greatest aces, the P-38 taught us that teamwork wins wars. One Lightning could fight, but two could rule the sky. The era of experimentation was over. The era of domination had begun. The sky was no longer Germany's. It belonged to the twin devil and the men who learned to dance with death at 30,000 feet. June 6, 1944, D-Day. Dawn broke over Normandy in streaks of smoke and silver. Below, the beaches of France erupted under the heaviest bombardment in modern history. Above them, a storm of wings filled the sky. C-47s towing gliders, B-26s dropping ordnance, Spitfires and Mustangs prowling low. But higher still, guarding the invasion from the unseen threat of the Luftwaffe, flew the twin-tailed angels of the U.S. 8th and 9th Air Forces, the P-38 Lightnings. Their engines drummed across the channel in paired rhythm. Each pair covered another, weaving a net of protection across the sea lanes. Radar operators on the British coast reported hundreds of twin signatures sweeping east. The Lightning was everywhere, and to German pilots watching from the remnants of airfields near Caen and Cherbourg, it seemed the sky itself had turned against them. By dawn's first hour, no Luftwaffe fighter dared to cross into the invasion corridor. The once proud Jagdgeschwader, JG-2, Richthofen, and JG-26, Schlaggeter, waited on half-fueled aircraft, strafed before they could even take off. P-38s screamed in from the clouds, their propellers throwing shimmering arcs through the morning haze. They dropped from 15,000 feet into precision attacks on runways, fuel dumps, and truck convoys. Each pass left fire and confusion. German ground troops, unaccustomed to twin-engine fighters strafing with pinpoint accuracy, gave the Lightning a new name, Donnerangel, Thunder Angel. Gun camera film from June 6 shows Lightnings diving through sheets of tracer fire, ripping apart flak towers with calm precision. Every tracer that rose to meet them was answered by 5 streams of .50 caliber light. The P-38As struck with speed, climbed away on one engine if necessary, and returned again without mercy. In one sortie near Bayeux, Major Jack Jenkins led 4 Lightnings against a column of German trucks. "We came in low," he later recalled, "throttles full forward. You could see the men jumping out trying to scatter. We hit them so fast, the explosions followed behind us like footsteps." By summer's end, the Lightning's domination stretched across every front. France, Italy, the Pacific. It flew photo reconnaissance over Berlin, bomber escort to Poland, and ground attack in the hedgerows of Normandy. Its sheer versatility overwhelmed the Luftwaffe's dwindling numbers. When German interceptors tried to scramble, they were met by P-38s before their wheels even lifted. Everywhere they appeared, the same pattern unfolded, a streak of silver against blue, a roar that grew and split into 2 distinct tones. Then silence, broken only by the crackle of burning fuel and the scream of sirens on the ground. By late 1944, even German ace Walter Krupinski admitted in a captured report, "The Americans own the sky. Their twin-engined fighter attacks us with impunity. It is fast, heavily armed, and without weakness at altitude." Statistics told the rest. By September, P-38 groups had flown over 130,000 sorties in Europe alone. Their escort coverage extended deep into Germany, ensuring that bomber losses fell by nearly half. Every Lightning sortie meant another German squadron forced to hide, another convoy destroyed, another airfield cratered into dust. But victory has its cost. Many Lightnings never returned, Engines failed, ice formed, flak found its mark. The wrecks of P-38s dotted the fields of France, their twin tails jutting from the earth like gravestones. The men who flew them understood the paradox of domination. It gave no comfort, only endurance. "The Lightning is a hard master," wrote Lieutenant Jean Meredith in his diary. "It demands everything, but it gives you the sky." By the time the Allies crossed the Rhine, the Luftwaffe was a ghost of its former self. Fuel was scarce, aces were gone, training was rushed, and above the ruins of a collapsing Reich, the twin booms of the Lightning traced silent arcs in the high thin air, an emblem of industrial might, technological supremacy, and human resolve. The Germans once mocked its size, its shape, its purpose. Now they stared upward from shattered runways and whispered the name that haunted them: Gebelschwanzteufel. The fork-tailed devil owned the heavens. The sky, once German, now belonged to the roar of American thunder. War is not won by courage alone. It is won by those who can outbuild, outfuel, and outfly their enemy. By 1944, the United States had become a continent-sized factory, and the Lockheed P-38 Lightning was one of its finest products of industrial warfare. Every rivet, every sheet of aluminum, every crate of ammunition was a note in the thunderous symphony of total production. In Burbank, California, the Lockheed Vega plant operated day and night under camouflage netting to hide from imagined Japanese bombers. Inside, thousands of workers, men and women, engineers and welders, young and old, moved like clockwork. The rhythmic hiss of pneumatic drills blended with the pounding of rivet guns. Each day, the factory turned out up to one completed Lightning every hour. The process was relentless. Engines from Allison in Indianapolis, superchargers from General Electric in Lynn, Massachusetts, propellers from Curtiss-Wright, each component shipped by rail, truck, or convoy, converging in an industrial ballet orchestrated with military precision. The result, more than 10,000 P-38s built between 1941 and 1945, each a twin-engine testament to a nation that could outproduce fear itself. Meanwhile, Germany's factories burned. By the time the Allies established air superiority, the once mighty Luftwaffe had become a relic gasping for fuel. Synthetic plants in Leuna and Piu-Litz lay in ruins from P-38 and B-17 raids. Training programs were slashed. Green pilots were thrown into combat after barely 20 hours of flight. One captured German mechanic admitted bitterly, "We lose one, it's gone forever. They lose one, and 10 more arrive next week." On the Allied side, logistics matched innovation. The Lightning consumed over 500 gallons of 100-octane fuel per mission, and the U.S. Army Air Forces delivered it like clockwork. Fuel convoys crossed the Channel, pipelines stretched across Europe, and depot crews refilled, rearmed, and relaunched squadrons within hours. Every sortie, every victory, was paid for not only in blood, but in barrels of fuel, tons of aluminum, and the unending hum of assembly lines. This was war by arithmetic, and America had mastered the equation. Pilots rotated home to train the next generation. Airfields expanded from muddy strips to vast concrete fortresses. Each morning, formations of Lightnings rose in perfect intervals, their twin tails gleaming in the dawn. To German radar operators, it must have seemed endless, a mechanical tide that could not be stopped, only endured. The numbers tell the story. By the end of 1944, the U.S. was producing 50,000 aircraft per year. Germany, crippled by bombing and fuel shortages, barely managed a fraction. The Luftwaffe's veteran pool evaporated. For every seasoned ace lost, a dozen inexperienced replacements took his place and died within weeks. In contrast, American production ensured that every fallen pilot's aircraft was replaced before his name reached the casualty list. This was not just war. It was industrial inevitability. Even the Lightning's variants reflected this scale. The P-380L, the ultimate form, rolled from the lines with boosted engines, underwing rockets, and dropped tanks for missions deep into Austria and Czechoslovakia. Every improvement came faster than the enemy could react. The machine evolved in real time, its power multiplied by the thousands. From the hangars of England to the jungles of New Guinea, crates stamped with the Lockheed logo became symbols of American reach. Each shipment meant another squadron taking flight, another front reinforced, another blow to a faltering Reich. In the air, domination looked like courage. On the ground, It sounded like machinery. When an airfield chief at New Hampstead was asked how long they could keep up the tempo, he simply replied, "As long as Detroit keeps breathing." And so it did. Every factory whistle, every rail car, every oil drum fed the storm. The Lightning was no longer a single fighter. It was the product of an empire of engineers, builders, and dreamers. Germany had men of skill and valor. America had an avalanche of steel. And once it began to roll, nothing on earth could stop it. The war ended not with a roar, but with silence. The skies that once thundered with propellers and gunfire grew still. Across Europe, wrecks of twisted metal lay in fields and forests, mute memorials to the struggle that once filled the heavens. And among them, more than a few twin-tailed silhouettes rested nose down in the earth, their aluminum skins dulled by rain and time. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning, the aircraft once mocked, had outlived the laughter. It had fought from the frozen air of Norway to the humid jungles of New Guinea. It had escorted bombers to Berlin, strafed Rommel's convoys in Tunisia, and photographed Tokyo before the end. Its pilots flew more miles, more missions, and more roles than any other American fighter in the war. It was escort, interceptor, reconnaissance platform, and ground attacker, a machine that refused to fit in one category because it had redefined them all. When the smoke cleared, the numbers spoke louder than any boast. Over 10,000 Lightnings built, over 1,800 enemy aircraft destroyed in Europe alone, and in the Pacific, it carried America's two top-scoring aces, Richard Bong and Thomas Maguire, both flying P-38s, both legends carved in aluminum and fire. But beyond statistics, there was something more enduring. For the men who flew it, the Lightning was not just a weapon. It was a companion. Its engines sang them home when one was shot out. Its broad wings steadied them through flak and storm. And in its mirrored booms, they saw the reflection of their own courage. In 1945, as Europe rebuilt from ruins, captured German pilots were interviewed about the aircraft they had faced. Again and again, the same words appeared in their reports. "Dear Gabelschwans, Teufel der Schlimmste von allen." The fork-tailed devil, the worst of them all. Those who had once mocked it now remembered it with awe. They spoke of its speed, its endurance, its ability to appear out of nowhere and vanish into the clouds. To them, it had been less a plane and more a force of nature, a machine that turned the arrogance of certainty into the humility of survival. In post-war hangars and museums, the Lightning took on a quiet dignity. Its polished skin gleamed under soft light. Visitors walked beneath its wings, tracing the twin booms with reverent hands, reading the faded names painted by crews long gone. Miss Virginia, Pudgy, fork-tailed angel. To the new generation, it looked futuristic even in stillness, a shape ahead of its time, forever poised between invention and legend. Kelly Johnson once said, standing beside a preserved P-38 at Burbank, "They called it strange. I called it American. Today, historians call it something else, a turning point." It proved that the marriage of engineering and imagination could overcome even the most entrenched tradition. It turned mockery into mastery, and it wrote a chapter in the sky that no storm could erase. In the end, the Lightning's legacy is not just of metal or mechanics, but of faith. Faith in ideas that seem absurd until they fly. The Luftwaffe once laughed. The world once doubted. But when those twin tails carved white arcs across the heavens, every doubt turned to silence. Because in that silence history whispered the truth. The fork-tailed devil had earned its wings, and somewhere above the clouds, the echo of its engines still lingers, the sound of mockery transformed into myth.